Character isn't who you think you are. It's what your repeated choices prove. Welcome back to the Mike Method. I'm your host, Mike Desjardins. And today I'm joined by Andrew Allen, a multi-platinum Canadian singer-songwriter with 5 top 10 singles, collaborations with artists like Meghan Trainor, Carly Rae Jepsen, Rachel Platten, Taeyeon, and Marco Mengoni, and nearly 2 decades of touring alongside acts like Bruno Mars, OneRepublic, Train, and Andy Grammer. But Andrew's story goes far beyond music. In this conversation, we explore his transition from performer to keynote speaker and how his HIIDA theory, how you do anything is how you do everything, became a framework for character, discipline, responsibility, and intentional growth. We talk about the difference between personality, identity, and character, why willpower is unreliable, but discipline can be trained, how small choices become proof of who we are, and why the character we build when life is easy determines how we respond when life gets hard. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, the best way to help us grow our audience is to hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. Andrew, thanks for making time to be on the podcast today.
Man, it is absolutely my pleasure. I appreciate you making the time for it. This is great.
Well, you know what? So we were introduced by a prior guest, Janice Porter, and I said to her, think of someone that you would love to hear on the podcast. And I said, think about that overnight and let me know who that person is. And she wrote me the next day and she's like, click this link. This is the person. And
wow.
And so a huge compliment from Janice to you. And she was, so I went in the link and I saw your history of like going from musician to leadership. And I thought, okay, this can be a fascinating story. And then you've got a ton of videos that you've put out there with your thought process and what your belief pattern is. And I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta have this guy on the podcast. So I'm so glad to be in conversation with you.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. I appreciate it.
So, let's start there. Cause I think if I was listening to this podcast right now, I'd be like, okay, well, what was that transition? Like, how do you go from musician to leadership? And tell us the story.
I think in the world of music, there's a lot of people that, they see the golden egg at the end and they're like, that's what I want. I want to be a rock star. And oddly enough, for me, that's not really how it started. And it's not where I was aiming. And when I think maybe my perspective shifted and I wanted that, that's when things kind of shifted the other way. So going back to the very beginning, I've played music all my life, love music. I always connected through it. I always had this belief that everybody could do exactly what I was doing. I didn't see it as anything special, that I could write songs, that I could sing, or that I could play an instrument, until I started to notice that not everybody does it.
Right.
And when I would show up with friends or whatever, and I would play an instrument, they would gather and they would start to sing along with the songs. And it was something that connected them and brought them together. And I guess it was probably 2008, I sold everything I had. I bought a minivan and I decided I'm just going to go on tour. I'm just going to try and figure this out. But it wasn't because I wanted to be a rock star. It was because I wanted so badly to find connection and to get out on the road and meet people where they were at. I mean, you can't just rock up to a bar and just kind of, walk in a different town and start chatting to people, but they're like, you're a little creepy. Whereas if for some reason, when you go in with a guitar, if you sing a song that they kind of like, they want to talk to you after.
Yeah.
And I was kind of on this journey of just, exploring where people were at, how it landed, what I could connect with, what mattered to me, what didn't matter to me. And so throughout the music, there was always this messaging that was like, how to live a better life, how to live a bigger life, how to, chase things that drive passion and make you excited. And the beauty of it is that when you have that kind of deep-rooted passion of connectivity, then it didn't really matter if singles blew up or didn't blow up, because you were already succeeding if you were having these conversations with people. So then, take it a bunch of years after that, where I'm sitting now, and I've found the music industry has changed so dramatically over the years. And maybe there's also through my life, I've just found so many opportunities to connect and lead and inspire and encourage that there wasn't enough lyrics to go along with it. And so instead it turned more into speaking and having the opportunity to stand up in front of corporations, retreats, and, really open up the conversation around what a life that's lived intentionally could look like.
And I think anyone that goes through that kind of transformation usually lands on like a word or kind of an area of leadership or area of a life well lived that is their grounding point. What was that for you?
I always subscribe to the mantra, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Okay.
It was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And it still is a big one for me. It's like, I don't have much art up in my studio, but the one thing I do is that printed on a piece of paper in a frame. And what that says to me is that, even these small little actions that we do daily, they represent the bigger actions when we have the opportunity to do them. And when I started digging into that concept, what it exposed in me was character. And I would say if I was to ground myself in anything, it would be character. And it's as soon as I bring in the word character to a lot of people, they are like, oh, so you think you're perfect? Or they're like, oh, you're judging me. And I'm like, no, to me, character is this wonderful driving force at the root of who we are. And if we neglect it, or we pretend like it doesn't exist, or we just don't want to intentionally create it, it will just become on its own. And when I look at how you do anything is how you do everything, it came into my head that it's like, oh my gosh, that's actually a framework. If you look at your results first, and then you back that off and you go, okay, what actions did I take to get there? And then you back that off and you go, well, what were the character traits that caused those actions? Now, as long as we're not looking at it judgmentally, and instead we look at it informationally, and we go, oh, here's some really wonderful information for me to ingest, so then I can either celebrate the character traits that are working, or I can change the ones that aren't, so that I can then affect my response and my actions and ultimately my results. And that just, as soon as I started looking at my own life and applying that framework to it, I got so fired up, because I was like, oh my gosh, finally, here's this chance of recognition where you go, wait a second, I have choice. I have full choice on how I want to develop and train my character so that I can be the person I want to be in order to have the life I want to have. And that, I don't know, it fired me up.
And how would you differentiate, like when you discovered this principle or these set of principles, and you're like, characters, like the word, that's the word that I use to best describe this. How do you differentiate that with personality?
That's a great question. I think that personality, a lot of the time, I think a lot of your personality traits come in at birth, to be completely honest. I think we sort of have these pre-wired things, and a neuroscientist might tell me yes or no, I'm right or I'm wrong. But the way I look at personality traits is they are there.
Right.
You can adjust them. You can be like, oh, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. And then, introverts that are like, but I actually like people. It's like, no, I get it. But character traits, in my mind and from my research, character traits are fully trainable, and they are the exact driving force that creates our response. So if we are somebody who has developed the character trait of gratitude, then in every single thing we do in life, we're going to look at it through a lens of gratitude. Whereas if we don't look at it like that, and gratitude is not a character trait that we've developed, then I believe we're not looking at life with gratitude. If that makes sense. Did that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just interesting to differentiate, right? Because I think sometimes people would use those words synonymously to say, like, oh, my character, my personality. And it's like, well, no, because I feel like, your personality is just sort of how you're showing up, as you say, whether you're introverted, extroverted, outgoing, less outgoing, right? Humorous, more stoic, or quieter in nature, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're a risk taker, not as much a risk taker, but those aren't really character qualities, right? Like what I hear from you when you say character, this is more kind of on like this internal compass almost. Like, what's your thought?
I think that's great. I think it's funny when you're talking about that, you gave me a great example. So somebody drops a $5 bill, falls out of their pocket, and you see it.
Yeah.
And you've developed this character of gratitude, or of discipline, or of, truth.
Yeah.
So an accountability, you see it and you pick it up and you give it back to them. Your personality trait will define whether you're like, oh, here you go, sir. Or if you're like, hey, buddy, you dropped your $5. I think that's where the differentiation comes in, is like, that's just who, that's like your outward facing stuff, but you can still show up as an introvert or an extrovert.
Right.
But you can be grateful or ungrateful, or you can be empathetic or non-empathetic, and you can still like being by yourself or being out in public. It doesn't. So you know what I'm saying? Is like, and the other word that I think often gets synonymous with character is identity.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And that one I've been struggling with over the last year, because I bring up character and somebody says, oh, your identity. I'm like, no, it's not. It's different. And what I've discovered is that identity is what you believe about yourself.
Right.
Right. You could say, oh, part of my identity is that I am very disciplined, and I'm a very, very hard worker. Well, if your results don't prove that you're a hard worker and that you're very disciplined, you can believe that's you.
Yes.
But your character says otherwise.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So your identity can be proven through repeated character trait choices, but you can also just believe, well, this is who I am. It's like that. Hooray for you. That's not accurate. You know what I'm saying?
Because I guess what you're saying is like, identity is like self-identify, right? Like this is how
Yes,
I think I show up in the world. And what I hear you saying is, well, yeah, okay, part of that's your personality, but like you're also frustrated with the outcomes you're getting. And that has more to do with your character, which is like
yes,
your mindset, your behaviors, your habits, the choices that like in stoicism, they would say your reasoned choices, right?
that's
The
right.
things that you're consistently doing that are leading towards those outcomes. And the other thing they'd say is like the outcomes are perfect.
Mm,
So people say, well, they're not perfect because the outcomes, they aren't what I want. Like, no, no, no.
yeah,
The outcomes are perfect because they were driven by the system. So the
that's right.
system created that. Your character created your mindset, your habits, your behaviors, your actions,
Mm,
and they drove a perfect outcome, not an outcome you want,
yes,
but the system worked. It just didn't
yes,
work the way you wanted it to. So you could argue about the outcomes,
yeah,
or we could draw backwards and say, okay,
mhm,
something about this system
mhm,
doesn't work because I need it to produce different results consistently. It's currently working and
yes.
consistent, but it's not producing the results I want.
Exactly. And that's a huge thing about, like, I dubbed it the HIIDA theory. So how
Okay.
do you do anything?
Yeah.
And it's a mirror. It is just literally saying, hey, here is your results.
Yeah.
They don't lie.
Right.
Right. And you look at them and you go, well, like you said, well, I'm not happy
Yeah.
with them. Well,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That is information that tells
Sure.
you you're not happy with them.
Yeah.
So then a lot of times people will just step that one step backwards and they go, well, you didn't get, like, I'm training for a half marathon right now. So you didn't
Okay.
get the time you wanted in the half marathon
Yeah.
because you didn't run enough.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so the fix then is I need to run more. It's like, well, I wish you the best with that. Like, just to try and get your brain to just go, I'm just going to run more.
Yeah.
But then if we step back further than that, it's that response that you made when it was 4:30 in the morning. That was the only time you had to run and it's raining outside. And you said, no, I'm not going for a run. But then you go, well, how do I change my response? I can't just, it's like, right, you got to go one step back to your character and start to develop discipline.
Okay.
And the way I believe that you can do this is not by focusing on the run at all. Focus on something else that's like that simple little step. Maybe it's, I'm going to turn the shower to cold for 30 seconds at the end of every one of my showers. I'm going to do that for like a whole month. And you start doing that. And at the end of the month, you go, I did it. I did that. Well,
I've,
now you started to develop this disciplined character trait.
I've done it. I still hate it.
Oh, it sucks.
I actually forced myself to do that. I didn't do it for a month. I did it for 2 weeks.
I still do it. I still do it
Oh,
every morning and I hate it.
yeah. And I was kind of like, I'm not sure I see the benefit to this, but I wanted to prove that it was possible. So like I could do this. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yes.
if I can do this, I'll just go do
Yes.
it and then that'll be it. Right. So
Good for you. Yes. I love that.
it's funny
Yeah.
because it's like getting a shot of caffeine, basically. Like it's like definitely when the days that I'm not feeling, energized to go do something. Okay, so this thing about discipline, I love this conversation because I think that people mistake willpower for discipline.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I shouldn't say I've never thought of this because I probably have thought of this, but I haven't thought of it recently. Discipline and willpower. Again, I would say that, yeah, discipline is that character trait that you train and refine.
Yeah.
And when you repeat it, it starts to generate evidence to prove to you, and this then becomes your actual identity, that you are a disciplined person.
Right.
Willpower, I think, sometimes can just be like just sheer, I didn't mean to give you a thumbs up there. I feel like willpower sometimes is just sheer grit.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely have some people in my life who I think exude a lot of willpower. There's something they don't want to do, but they will do it, and just out of sheer grit. But I don't know that they would do it twice.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, so talk about running, right? Like there are people that have decided they want to go run a marathon. They run a marathon and then they don't run it again because it was awful and it hurt a lot. And then, and they did the training. So they had the willpower to get through the training, but they're not a runner.
Right.
They just ran a marathon.
Yeah.
They're not a runner. And so, whereas there's people who have the discipline to say, okay, I'm going to follow a disciplined program of getting myself ready to run a marathon as one of my goals. Maybe I'll run a 10K along the way. Maybe I'll do a half at one point. Maybe I'll get my friends involved, but I'm going to have a schedule and I'm going to follow that schedule through until I'm ready to go. And those people become runners and also happen to run a marathon and maybe run several marathons, but their identity, right? Their character has changed because now part of their character is I'm a person who consistently runs as for my health. Whereas, a marathon could be, well, I kind of want to do this thing to say I've run a marathon to see if I
Yeah.
can do it. But well, are you running a marathon because you want to be a healthier person? And running is one thing that some healthy people can do.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing it because I want to see if I can run a marathon. It's like, okay, well, that actually interestingly drops off a cliff for most people.
Yes, that's a wonderful distinction, though, to recognize the difference between those two types of people. I made I think I posted a video about this. Is I am not a gym person,
Right?
and
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
what I had to do, because I don't like hurting. Like, I don't know who loves hurting, and like some people maybe do, or maybe they don't hurt. Like, so my wife and I, as we're training for this half marathon, she is so much stronger than me, or something is stronger about her legs or muscles or something. Every time we go for a run, we come back and I am so sore, but I've committed to this activity, and it's not just because of the half. I've committed to it because I really want to be a runner. I really want to be strong and physically fit and able to like show up for my kids and my kids' kids. But we come back from these runs and she is like golden, like nothing hurts. She's totally fine. And I'm like, I'm sitting in ice baths. I'm putting every kind of cream I can on my legs just to try and make them stop hurting. And then I know in 2 days, there's going to be another run that we got to do to train. And I'm like, this is absolute mayhem. But in the process, I've been able to connect my identity to being somebody who values health and wellness.
Yes.
And that has been proven by my consistent dedication to the gym and by my consistent discipline to this running program.
Yeah.
And now I can, like you said, like I can look at myself and go, I'm a runner. But deeper than that, I'm consistent and I'm disciplined. And how that shows up in other parts of my life is if somebody needs something from me, then, and I say I'm going to do it, I do it. Because how you do anything is how you do everything. So I keep showing up for these runs, even though they hurt my body so bad.
Yeah.
And so you can count on me when I say that I will do something. Now that's, again, not to go back to like, oh, I'm an exemplary character. That's not at all like.
But that's a portion of your character.
It's a portion. And I keep learning as the days and the weeks go on. There's a great example that I just could have had dropped in my face. Last week, I was really stressing about a bunch of stuff that I had going on. I have, a lot of us, we have all these little plates that are spinning on the end of sticks and we're all trying to manage them so they don't fall and break. And right now I have a few concerts that are coming up. One I'm promoting, by myself. It's really important. I've got another couple concerts that I've been hired for. Some of them have actually enlisted me to write them a spoken word piece, like specialized just for them. And I'm like, okay, this is great. So I've got all these things. And then I've also got my keynote talks that are coming up that I'm, making sure that I have them identified. I'm like, okay, there's all these different pieces going on. And at the same time, I had already committed to going camping for 3 nights and I was performing on the second night. And I was thinking in my head, maybe we shouldn't go for 3. Maybe we should just do 2. Maybe I should just go out for the show. But my daughter, who's 10, loves camping.
Okay.
And this was one of those moments where I plugged it into Claude and was like, listen, I need to get my schedule real tight here because I got to figure this out. Yeah. And I was like, be ruthless. Like, I need to know. And it's like, Andrew, your entire framework rests on how you do anything is how you do everything. And you are not proving it by having your mind somewhere else when you're going to go camping with your family. Right. You need to be present because how you do anything is how you do everything. So if that's what you're focusing on, that's what you committed to, then you're going to turn off your head. None of those things are fires. You need to let them just do their thing. You go spend 3 nights, put your phone away. And that is the point of that's the whole point. And I'm like, right. So I keep getting schooled. So I'm not.
But I think everything you're describing is discipline, right? Like I think James Clear, I think it was in James Clear in Atomic Habits, he said, hope is not a strategy and willpower is like hope.
Yes.
Like, I hope I have the willpower. I'm just going to rely on my willpower to get up at 4:30 in the morning when it's pouring rain and go running. Right. Like, for me, it's CrossFit. So I'm like going to wake up and go do that. That I can do because I love doing it. I don't mind the pain. I like it. But the 2 things I struggle with are stretching, which I do a stretching protocol once a week, and then zone 2 Peloton. So for like 45 minutes to an hour, which is just like a monotonous ride, right? Steady state zone 2 cardio. And so I'm like, okay, well, those are the 2 things I need to do most right now to support the recovery from the days that I do CrossFit. So, and they're the things that always slipped. I always had some excuse. I was relying on willpower. So then I'm like, nope, that's it. I'm a zone 2 cardio person. I got to figure out how to pull this off. And then I realized that you could use Netflix on the Peloton. Like you can go into the entertainment area, and I'm like, this is great. So now I actually get excited about doing the zone 2 cardio. I put it in my schedule and I am disciplined to do this zone 2 cardio twice a week. I
Yeah.
have my stretching protocol. I stick it in my calendar like a business meeting. I don't miss it.
Good.
And I get up, and as soon as I start doing the stretching protocol, I'm like, I hate doing this. This is so
Yeah.
boring.
Yeah.
Then when
Yeah.
I'm done, I'm like, oh my God, I really needed this. This is so good that I did this. I didn't realize how many things were sore or
Yeah.
immobile or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But I think the distinction I really like you bringing when you talk about character and discipline is that you're kind of not relying on your best self. Like it effectively, willpower is like every day I'm going to wake up with 100% energy and motivation. And that's insane. Nobody does that.
Nobody.
Right.
No.
So some days you wake up and 40% is your motivation and maybe 50% is your energy. So then on those days, if you're hoping that willpower is going to be the thing, it's going to fail, right? Because he's like, oh, I'm tired. I don't feel like doing it, right? Where discipline, I feel like discipline is like, no, it doesn't matter where my energy is, or it doesn't matter. I'm going to do this thing that I committed to doing.
Yes.
That's it.
I love that.
I've committed, so I'm doing the thing. Now I might have to modify it because maybe my energy isn't as high as I wanted it to be. So I'm not going to run. I'm going to run, but not at the pace I'd normally run. But that doesn't mean I'm not running. And willpower would say you could take a day off. Discipline says you can lower your output today. You're still going.
I love that. You also just said something that I thought was interesting and wonderful. When you asked me way earlier, do I think of like, character as like your compass?
Yeah.
I actually think of identity as a compass.
Okay.
What you just said was like, I am somebody who does zone 2 or whatever you called it.
Zone 2 cardio. Yeah.
Zone 2 cardio. I'm a zone 2 cardio pellet.
Yeah.
Like I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So you're not that guy. You weren't that guy yet.
No.
So that was where it was pointed. That was the compass. In order to get that, you needed to develop the character trait of discipline in order to be able to and consistency to go, I am that guy. And then you use some of James Clear's advice to be like, oh, I can watch Netflix.
Yeah.
So you add it, you know what I mean? When you make the environment better.
Yeah.
Then you go, oh, I can show up to this because it doesn't suck as bad.
Yeah. I'm watching like a Kevin Hart special right now, and it's hilarious. And I get excited to jump on the Peloton because I'm like, I get to watch this for 45 minutes. Like, great.
Because you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that in the middle of your workday. Otherwise, right?
No, because invariably something comes up. That was the other thing is that, in 2010, I'd always worked out after work, and, friends would call and say, hey, do you want to go do this? Or my wife would say like, hey, let's go do this together. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds like more fun than going to the gym. So then my workouts became sporadic, right? I went to this Tony Robbins, like, the Unleash the Power Within thing for 4 days. And he's like, what's the biggest thing that would have the most dramatic effect on your life if you change it right now? And I'm like, the consistency and quality of my workouts. And it's okay, well, what's holding you back from that? I'm like, oh, it's like the time of day. And the reason I didn't work out in the morning is I was a night owl. And so I'd stay up late. So then I came out of those 4 days and I said, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night from now on. And I am going to wake up and I'm going to go to the gym. Now, the workouts I do in the morning never feel as good as the workout I do in the afternoon or the evening. Because sometimes when I travel, I'll switch it. But the consistency is unbelievable. Yeah. And so I just said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do this. And that was 16 years ago. And so I just decided I'm going to bed early. And I went from being a night owl to being a morning person and getting up at 6 a.m. to go do this CrossFit thing or the Peloton or stretching or whatever. I pickleball, sometimes it's pickleball, skiing, but I get up and I go do the thing. And that was not who I was going into that weekend. That's
phenomenal. And I think that shows you so much about who you already were, like who your character already was, right? Where you're like, that's so much accountability. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about the word responsibility, and he breaks it in half, right? And he goes, it's your ability to respond. And we often forget this, and that's why we put blame on everybody else. We think it's everybody else's fault. So the answer to the Tony Robbins question could have been, it's my wife, it's my friends. They all invite me to go out, and that's, I need to live a good life, and that's part of my good life. As opposed to going, Mike, you have to change your workout. Well, if it's going to be in the morning, darn it, there's a fallout effect of that means I got to go to bed earlier. But you figured it out and you were responsible for your own action. And that's like, I don't know. Interestingly enough, as I've been diving into the world of character, there's this beautiful part of saying, wow, we have our own choice. But the reason I discovered that, which some people be like, well, of course we have our own choice. But for me, I had to look back. So if I looked at okay, there was my character that made the choice. I'm going to go out. I'm going to sell everything I have. I'm going to buy a minivan. I'm just going to start touring. I'm going to show up on stage every night, regardless if I had 3 hours of sleep. So like you said, there's some discipline in that I didn't intentionally choose. But I had chose the career, which nobody wants to pay for a ticket to come see an artist who walks up on stage. He's like, oh, I'm just, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Then nobody wants to see you.
Yeah.
And I had to like bring it every single night. And I was totally fine with that because it was a deeper passion. But that moment where I made that choice, my character had been developed up to that point. It's not like you just don't have any character because you never chose it.
Yeah.
And when I looked back, I was able to identify like some pretty major things that took place in my life that created a choice. And some of them were conscious choices, some of them were not. So as an example, when I was born, I was given up for adoption. My mom was 16 years old when she had me. So she gave me up for adoption. I was adopted by a wonderful family. And only years later, when I was in therapy for something completely different, was I made aware of the fact that most children who are given up for adoption have a fear of abandonment.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, that checks, that makes sense. But I have a wonderful relationship with my birth mother and her family and my birth father and his family. And then also with my adoptive family, which is my family. And so I'm like, there's no way I have a fear of abandonment. And the therapist was like, you don't know you do, but you probably do.
Okay.
Then I started digging into it and I was like, hold on, what? And I'm like, what do people with fears of abandonment do?
Sure.
And they can go one of two ways. One, they self-sabotage relationships.
Yeah.
They want nothing to do with them.
Okay.
Two, they crave connection so deeply that they will do anything to find it. So fast forward, I'm going to sell everything I have, buy a minivan, and stand on a stage just so people afterwards will come and talk to me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So there's this, like that is where it started to form. And then you go past that. I had a traumatic event that took place at a summer camp where I was injured by a falling tree and it killed a friend of mine. And it was this horrific accident. And coming out of that, I remember overhearing people saying he's going to go one of two ways. Either he's going to be afraid of life or he's going to choose to pursue something crazy. And I remember like I was 12 years old and I made that choice consciously. And I was like, my friend only got 8 years on this planet. I'm not going to waste a second. So what can you be afraid of after you've experienced that?
Yeah.
Right? Like what could possibly shake you that bad? Like, oh, hey, do you want to go live out of your van for a while? Yeah, sure. Do you want to go travel to this country or this country or this country? Yeah, let's go. Like, what do I have to lose? And so you develop this innate sense of courage and compassion and empathy. And those were all unintentional character traits that I started to just develop. And it was only in the last few years where I've realized that those can be intentional. So wherever we're sitting right now, we can look back on the things that happened to us and we can see the responses we made to those things. And we can't go back and change those, but we can identify them and go, holy crap, I showed up like that and I don't want to show up like that anymore. I actually want to show up like this. I actually want to be the zone 2 Peloton guy. I actually want to do, and that shows that we still have that our own agency, our own ability to make the choice. This is the character trait I want because that's the result I want. And once we start to train that character trait, similar to walking, we just do it. That's going to become the automated response that happens. And I think that's like, to me, that's just so thrilling.
You've literally just given the modern day interpretation of stoicism. So stoicism is the branch of philosophy that I study and have for like the last 5 years now.
I feel like we could have a whole conversation on that. I'm wearing like the Marcus Aurelius, like you could leave life right now.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Is it the memento mori?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. So the reality is that, stoicism, they figured out a long time ago, is like your character is a choice you get to make.
Yeah.
And then the question was like, well, how long is it going to take me to actually like develop my character differently? Yeah. It's like instantaneously. You're like, well, what? No. And it's like, well, yeah, because it's actually literally a decision that you're going to make different choices moving forward. So in the face of a very specific choice, you're going to choose differently. You're going to choose discipline over willpower. You're going to choose yourself over pleasing others. You're going to there's these moments, right, where you're making these, what they call reasoned choices. And what I love about it is it says, well, but I think it was Marcus Aurelius who actually wrote about not being perfect. It isn't about being perfect. It isn't about like, well, if I make this choice today, then I need to be perfect for the rest of my life. It's like, well, no, you may slip.
Yeah.
But then you get to choose again next time. So you can't be like, well, I slipped once, so therefore like my character's blown. It's like, well, no, like you were doing great. And then This one decision you look back and went, oh, that doesn't really fit the person I want to be. Okay, cool.
Right.
You're self-aware enough to
Yeah.
know I
Yeah.
did the thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
can just decide, well, yep, but now every second I get the opportunity to choose that character again, because the
Mhm.
past doesn't actually exist. It's gone. So in any moment, the present moment, I have the opportunity to choose the character that I have decided on. And then the next moment I have it again and again, and I constantly get a new choice.
And isn't that wonderfully liberating?
It also kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off, because it's kind of like,
Totally.
you could make this decision
Yeah.
and like just keep doing it. And if you slip, well, then just make the decision again, the one that you want, that's right
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah. They say, I can't remember who said it, but they're like, never miss twice. When you think about like,
Oh,
like,
that's Seinfeld. So Seinfeld has this thing. It was a young comedian who came up and said, like, how did you get so good? And he's like, I forget what he calls it. It's his string theory, but basically how it works is, you have to string together days. So he's like, you're going to write jokes every day, for, I think it's like 5 or 15 minutes or something. You're just going to write jokes, and then you're going to put a red X on the day in the calendar. This is back when we'd use like flippable calendars, right?
Yeah.
He's like, then a streak. Sorry, he calls it a streak, not a string, a streak. So he's like, his streak methodology is that you don't break the streak. So your goal is to never break the streak, and you just every day you put a red X. So the question would be like, somebody's like, what if I break the streak and like I miss a day? Okay, well then you jump back on the horse, and the next day you start the new streak. But like, if you were to look at that and zoom out over time, the few days that you missed of the giant streak, right, that has like little tiny points that are missing in it, puts you so much further ahead of anyone else who's trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do, just by not breaking that streak.
That's right. And I love that he was saying 5 to 15 minutes. Like, it's not, that's the thing. So me getting into running.
Yeah.
I had been seeing a chiropractor, and because I had my back was really sore.
Yeah.
And the chiropractor was like, oh, would kind of fix me for like 2 days, and then I had to go back again. And she was like, you really like, just don't take up running. And I'm like, you used to like running. What do you mean don't run? And my wife at the same time, she was saying like, oh yeah, I'd love to run, but I don't know, like my knees kind of hurt. Oh, we were like, we should really be moving though more. So let's go for a walk. Yeah. We went for a walk, and we did that a bunch. And then one day she couldn't do the walk with me. She was like, oh, you go out for the walk. I'll go walk tomorrow. I'm like, no problem. So I went out for the walk, and walking by yourself is pretty boring. Like I was like, I don't really. So I jogged one leg of it, and I was like, huh. And I got home, and I was like, hey, I jogged that little leg. She's like, really? And you felt fine? I'm like, yeah, I felt okay. She's like, okay. So then the next day she went for a walk, and I didn't go with her. And she goes, I jogged that part and that part. And I was like, really? Oh, how about that? So then the next time, like, I tried to jog the whole thing. And before I knew it, we were kind of like jokingly competing with one another to jog a further length. And then that kind of turned into, maybe we should get new shoes because we don't have good running shoes. And so literally, like, we took that whole concept of be, do, have, and we put it in the correct order by saying, I want to be somebody that can do this. And then we did the do thing where we're doing the action, and only then did we go buy the new shoes, which is not like recommended if you're actually trying to not hurt yourself. But we did it. And then now here we are, like we're, 3 weeks out from a half marathon. We both feel great. We've been training a ton. And so it just started from those little tiny consistent steps every single day, which I don't know. I look back on it, I'm like, that is hilarious that we did that.
Well, and it's funny because I think, it's true with weightlifting too, right? Like, I think people that are like, I'm going to try to make big jumps in weights, but invariably if they go too fast, then what happens, like particularly in CrossFit, right? Because there's a lot of fast movements with weights. And so they go too fast and they injure themselves. And that injury, if it's a bone, then it'll, broken bone will be 8 weeks and then it'll be back at it. If it's a tendon, it could be 3 to 4 months before it's fully healed. Okay. If it's a muscle, it's like 2 weeks, right? So max. So, depending on what the injury is, it's like, well, the other person didn't try to climb weights or didn't try to go faster, but just consistently came every day and gave whatever effort they had. And as strong as they felt, that's what they lifted. But they weren't trying to shoot for records all the time. Yes. And so now plot that out over 1 year of a person having injuries or a person having no injuries, but going consistently and not missing any of the workouts. Like which one of those two people is going to be further ahead?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And it's not just running and or writing jokes, or maybe somebody's like, well, I want to write a book. And it's like, okay, we'll write a page. That's it. Of like garbage if you want. It doesn't really matter. It's just the act of writing every day. Just write for 1 page or write for 5 minutes and then stop.
Right.
It's the same adage of like the heaviest, when people are trying to get into working out, is heavy. The very heaviest weight they have to lift is the front door. If they can move the front door of the gym open, that's the most challenging part of starting a workout routine, is just moving that heavy weight. If they can move the front door, everything else gets easier from there.
That's good. And I think when I look at, keynotes and different corporations, they will often bring in athletes, people who are Olympians, people who have shown up consistently with small action every single day. And then they've achieved these awesome results, whether it's a podium or whatever. And I fully understand why corporations would do this. But a lot of the time, again, that focus is on the habit. It's on the action, as opposed to like, what is the character of that person that did that? Like, I have a friend of mine who is also a speaker, and his story is phenomenal. He was a freestyle skier. He turned into a freestyle ski coach. He took a bunch of kids out in Colorado, I think it was, and he pulled some trick and he ended up landing horribly wrong and he broke his neck. And they're like, we don't think you're going to walk.
Yeah.
Like, and they ended up doing this surgery. Yeah. And somehow miraculously, he in 3 months was able to get himself out of the hospital walking. Wow. Now he's got very limited information that's sent from his feet to his head. So if he wants to do things and walk or run, then he's almost telling his feet, oh, hey, there's a bump coming up. Hey, there's a bump. So it's not automated for him.
Yeah.
And he lives his entire life now with so much gratitude. And I haven't actually talked to him about this side of it yet, but knowing how hard it is to do the kind of jumps they do freestyle skiing, it's like you had to work so hard to get there. And I heard him speak the other day, and he was talking about how many injuries he had, like 2 broken ankles. He broke his collarbone. He broke, and he always came back from it. So when you think about that, and we look at the character trait of resilience, this dude obviously was like steeped in resilience. Like he's like, I am, and he would show up on these freezing cold mornings to practice tricks. And he was so grateful he could just be out there skiing. Well, now he has this life-changing accident, and it looks like, oh my gosh, that's when he developed gratitude. That's when he developed resilience. That's when he developed the discipline and the courage to go and walk. It's like, no, he developed it when the pressure wasn't on. Yeah. He developed that character trait, all those ones, when things were easier, like on a fun hill with fun friends, and he's young and just feeling fresh and everything. And he's developing this character trait of gratitude, and through the broken ankles, resilience and courage to hit these bigger jumps and to be inspiring and a good leader. He developed all those before all that pressure came down on his neck, figuratively and literally. And he was now facing the biggest challenge of his life. Can I walk again? Right? And so we look at this and we go, okay, this guy really did the work, the training early on. So when this crazy thing happened in his life, he was able to turn that around. And so that's why when I say a character is at the root of everything, if we do not develop good character, then when some sort of pressure hits, whether it's a tough conversation with a boss or with an employee, or if it's something in life, you're going through a divorce, or you've had a car accident or something like that, how you respond to that will be what you trained earlier.
Right.
Which I think
had the muscle for that.
Yes.
Built. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And that's why I see it as such an important piece of, like, this is a terrible example, but also great in my running process, to go back to that.
Yeah.
My back started hurting again. I was like, This is a problem. I went to a massage therapist, and he's like, it's not your back, it's your butt. Okay. And I was like, no, it's actually my back. And he's like, no, you're wrong. It's not your back. It's your butt. Your butt isn't firing. You've got these huge muscles, your glutes, they're not doing anything. So instead, you're using all these little tiny ones in your back. And that's what happens if we are trying to do all these actions without actually developing the root of our character. It's not going to stick. Right. We're just going to cause pain. We're not going to get the results we want. And instead, if you just focus on your butt, there's a chance you might actually get the results you want. It'll be less painful.
Who's done any physio or RMT work is probably going, it's the posterior chain. The whole thing's connected. You can't treat it as separate areas. Like,
I didn't
all had to learn that at some point.
Did you know? So he was telling me, Mike, that when you go into the gym and there are these different like weight machines or whatever, he's like, they basically created those weight machines off cadavers. So what they would do is they would take like a dead person's muscle and they would stimulate it. And then when it went like that, they're like, okay, that's how we make that muscle work, is we lift this thing. And that's why he was like, but that's not how the human body works. It's the posterior chain. It's everything works together. And I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. So I should stop doing these specific exercises sometimes. It's like, well, Sometimes you need to do full body stuff. And stretching. It's
It's
like
why
important.
functional fitness is so big, whether it's like, High Rocks, CrossFit, Orange
Yeah.
Theory, Barry's, like all these things that have taken
Yeah.
off versus, bodybuilding's still around, but like,
Yeah.
the ability of the body to move, right?
Yes.
Really move requires it to be doing functional training, not where the parts are connected, because you aren't just using your like bicep when you're
Yeah.
surfing or whatever you're doing, rock climbing. You're not just using the bicep by itself. It's working
No.
with your forearms and your grip strength and your
Yeah.
shoulders and your delts and your traps. Like everything is engaged, right?
Yes.
In doing this.
Yeah.
And that's how the body's designed to work, right? Whereas you
Yeah.
say like this point to point type, like this muscle does this, so we should exercise this muscle, doesn't really, it can make you look good. Like you can build great musculature with it, but performance wise and injury prevention wise, you're just so much further ahead when you're doing something that's functional in nature for fitness. I want to talk a little bit more about this character piece relative to becoming a thing that kind of, I forget where I found this. I really got to track this down, but probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was realizing that goals were starting to feel hollow. So whether I skied 45 days a year or I skied 40 days a year, I'm like, does it matter? Right? Like I love skiing, but there's some days where I was like, wow, I'm like just skiing to get the numbers up, even though the weather's crummy and I don't really want to go, but like I'm at 44 days. So, and so I started thinking about who I wanted to become in the world. And so I started thinking about the roles that I play. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm CEO, I'm a dad, a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a family member, I'm a leader, I'm a mentor to some people. So I'm like, okay, well, these are all different roles that I play in my life. Yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm actually, instead of writing, I'm still going to have goals, but I'm going to get really clear about who I'm becoming. So I'm becoming a husband who ... I'm becoming a CEO who ... I'm becoming a father who ... So, and then I hold on to that for the year and I review it every week. I read those statements to myself to remind me of who I am that I'm becoming. And I never really thought about it until today. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I really thought about it as developing my character. It wasn't really what I was thinking. I was just thinking like, I have all these roles and I want to be really conscious about the way that I'm showing up in those roles and how I'm going to be remembered for those roles. So I should probably make choices. Otherwise, I'll just be sort of going about my day. But it didn't dawn on me that the act of simply writing those statements was actually shaping my character until our conversation today.
That's such a, like, wow, man, like that's a very inspiring thing to be doing every day. Like, and very intentional to focus on that outcome and the result ultimately. And then like, what steps will it take for me to be that person? I think that's like, it's a wonderful discipline.
Well, I just realized like my daughter's, she's turning 14 this year. And so she's changing. So I need to be a different parent for her as she changes. Right. And then my business continues to grow and require different things of me. So then I need to change how I show up as a CEO. Right. Like, my family is getting older. My mother's getting older. My nephews are, one's in second year university. The other's graduating or is going into grade 12 next year. Like they need different things. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, I can't just keep showing up as the same person. And the world around me is changing. AI didn't exist a bunch of years ago, right? Like, and so I started to think about these roles that I play, and how I needed to be consciously adapting to reality, or I would just really be stuck in patterns, habits, and behaviors that didn't serve that role anymore, but it's just who I was. And so it's kind of like, just get up and do the thing without really thinking about, well, is that the highest and best of me for that role? And it's completely shifted my perspective. And I've never thought about it as character until we had this conversation today. So I'm grateful.
Wow. Yeah. I'd be really curious as you progress in this, if you start to identify what the character traits are that are present, right? When you look at it and you go, okay, I'm becoming this as a father. What are the rooted character traits that are creating that? Because if you are leading as a father with intention and with empathy and with even just with those two things, then whatever shift happens between you and your daughter, or how she changes or how you change, you will just be that. Because you said something as well where you're like, that's just who I was. How many of us say that all the time? Well, that's just who I am. I'm not a morning. That's just who I am. This is who I am.
Yeah.
You're right. That is who you are. So like, Yeah, so figure out who you really want to be and put that in there, because that's
Yeah.
the version that will just show up on autopilot. So if your autopilot happens to be, I'm super empathetic, I'm always intentional, I'm creating moments that matter to me because I want them to matter, then that's how you're going to show up every time, which is, I don't know, I think a lot better than just, it just so happened that I showed up this way. It's like, well, high five, great. Like, I'm glad it worked that time. But
This
and
year,
the awareness is so key too, right?
yeah.
Like, when I first started down this road of keynote speaking and having these conversations around character, I laughed because AI sometimes does this better than we do, right? It wants more context in order to provide you with the right response. And if it doesn't ask for more context, you better give it more context, because otherwise you're not getting the right response. But how many of the poor therapists out there are sitting with somebody who's saying, everybody else is the problem. It's everybody else. And they're going, that does sound pretty bad. And then only to eventually, like, you can't help that person until that person goes, this is what I'm responsible for. Here's where I'm the
Yes.
problem. Because once you realize you're the problem, you can be the solution. And it's the same as a map, right? If I were to say, hey, I'm looking to go to this destination, the first thing that Google's going to ask me is, where are you starting from? And if you don't give it this is my starting point, it can't give you accurate directions. And a therapist can't give you accurate directions unless you actually are aware enough to tell them where you're starting from. And so if you're saying, this is where I'm starting from, this is where I want to be as a dad, as a father, as a son, then that's like the first beautiful step. That's the gym door. That's the awareness saying, I'm here, I'm present for it, I want to do this. And I'm so curious now, like, I'd love to follow up with you later and be like, were there any character traits, now that you've been identifying that, what were the character traits that showed up in that process?
Well, I can tell you already because it's been, we're in May, so it's been 4.5 months at this point, right? So the traits were curiosity and this is for as a father. So it's curiosity and empathy. That was number one. 2 was bring the fun, which I've been doing since she was born, but it just a continuation of that. And 3 was teach lessons in an approachable way.
Wow.
So and what that means is, like, as a parent, one of the things is we're trying to, instill these lessons in our kids, but most of the time it's like, oh, I know mom, I know dad, like, or like, you think they're listening or they're pushed back or whatever. And so I'm like, how do I make these approachable by telling stories about things that happened during my day, decisions I made, things that happened when I was younger, just as like, casual conversation, but less about like, well, this is the lesson of like, and so that's not approachable. So it takes creativity though, to figure out how to sort of blend the lesson in a really approachable way. Sometimes I will post something on an Instagram story and it's not for me and it's specifically for my daughter. But if I send it to her in Instagram as a message, maybe she'll read it, maybe she won't, but she'll comment on it if it just happens to be on my story overall. And so it gets, and her friends do too. Like they'll comment, they'll like the post, but if I send it into a group message, I get dead air. So then I'm like, okay, it's not approachable for me to send it directly to them, but for me to show up that way online, it's super approachable for them. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's how I'm going to do it from now. I'm stop sending them things and I'm just going to post them. And when they just go through the story, which has got all sorts of fun stuff and family stuff, but then there'll also be this post that says something that's really important and something that I really want to convey to her, to my daughter, then I'll just put it as a story instead. So.
That's so smart.
That's smart. One area, but that's how I've been doing it for this year, at least. It's been 4.5 months. So I still have like time left for the rest of the year to keep going. So
your intentionality is off the hook. It's so inspiring. Like, just to hear how you're like very pointed on like, hey, I want this, I'm going to do this, and this is how I'm going to do. And it's like, dang, like I'm very grateful for you to be in that leadership space, because I think you must have inspired and encouraged a lot of really amazing leaders around the world, because that intentionality is just, it's so key.
It's been, I mean, I feel lucky that I figured out that was a thing you could do a long time ago, because it's really helped to transform my life in such a wonderful way. And I originally thought it was all about goals and like setting big goals. And that's how I first burnt out when I was like, as I told you before we hit record, when I was like 26, right? Because I was all about achieving material things, just setting big goals and hammering them. But there really wasn't intentionality to them. And it was burning out that made me realize that the intentionality and the discipline matters a lot more than being able to say, I've done this, I've done that. Like, I'd be like, I read 36 books per year. And I was like, okay, so who cares? Like, it doesn't really, maybe I've consumed them, but I've remembered and done nothing with those books. Whereas the intentionality would say, I'm going to read books that are a blend of ones that are super fun for me, ones that are more spiritual, self-help in nature, and then ones that are very specific to the place that we're at in the business right now that will help me with my thought process as a CEO.
Yeah.
Now, if I happen to read 12 books like that or 11, it doesn't really matter. It's just really, I'm already a reader, because that was the first step, is I wanted to become a reader. And so that's why I set a goal. But once the goals were done, then it was like, well, I'm already a reader. So now I should probably be more purposeful and intentional. And so it started to all coalesce for me a long time ago. And I'm just super grateful that I learned it young enough that I could apply it in a meaningful way to my life.
Wow. Yeah. That is awesome. And very encouraging. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. I know I can look at places in my life where I'm like, oh, the reading, like I love reading, and I love it when I take the time to read, but reading is one of those things where I'm like, I'm totally going to, after I do those dishes, or I'm totally going to, I just need to finish that thing outside. And then before you know it, that time and space has passed. And I go, darn, I really wanted to finish that. I like that a lot. I like it. That thought was great. And I love digging into it. And I didn't. So it's another one where I, need to put that on the calendar, become more intentional about it, and say, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, and what brought me to this, or like brought us to this part of the conversation, was really tying back to character, this discovery you had around character, which allowed us to go into depth today, which has been phenomenal. I've so appreciated this conversation. Again, thank you for making the time to be here today. If you want to check out Andrew, we'll put links to everything you need to know about him into the show notes. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate this.
Mike, this was an absolute pleasure. I feel like I'm going to walk away from this conversation just kind of higher and be like, wow, this is great. I'm so stoked. So I appreciate you doing this for all the listeners out there. And I really am grateful that you had me on the show today.